Hello in TV land. I was going to start tonight, we were, using the royal prerogative, or whatever that is. Some of the things that go on outside these little tapings, someone had requested a mention of something that had been written. And it's connected to, those of you who might have been watching the last few nights, what we're talking about anyway, as much as it might appear to be otherwise on the surface, but that doesn't matter. It went, what is the word but? But, yet again, the jailer rattling the keys. Talking about, if you recall, those of you who have been watching, we have for temporary purposes been describing the world of man as being composed of the primary world, which you could look at as being from wherever your brain is operating, like a line drawn through your brain. That the primary world is everything down here. It would be everything working in silence. It would be everything that would be the physical world. It would be all manifestations of human life, which might be or might have a common reflection, a parallel reflection in the wonderful world of bears and beavers. And from here up would be the singular world of man, wherein, no matter what others call it, would be the world of art, religion, science, all institutions, civilization. And it is, without any doubt, inseparable from the world of speech. So we're calling that the secondary world. Everything that is singular to man. Now, tied in with the opening that what is the word but again the sound of the rattling of the jailer's keys, tied to that is also something that someone here has recently written. I don't think he's here tonight, but I'll try to quote him, that says, it was in the matter of freedom, since everyone likes to talk about that literally and otherwise, but that in the primary world there is no freedom, while it is illusionary in the secondary. Now that is not exactly true. And yet, there is nothing that you can say that is exactly true about the secondary world, other than whatever you're talking about. The only thing you can say that is exactly, truthfully, on the money in the secondary world is to say it's in the secondary world. There is no way to define something outside of a closet if we're all living in a closed system, if this whole 3D reality was like a closet, a closed room. There is no way to absolutely, and I'm not trying to play with metaphysical ideas, but there is no way to make anything resembling an objective definition, a description, a telling of anything outside of the closed system. There is nothing to compare it to. There is no standard, which of course is one of the attempts that ordinary minds make of religion, to say there is a standard because there's something outside the system. That guy painted on black velvet, what do you call it? God or Jesus or Moses or Buddha. And they say that, which you can go, okay. But of course it's not true, because you came to find him or it or she outside the system. So when I was stopping there for a second, it wasn't to cover our collective asses, allegorically speaking, but it's simply to point out that I was going to say that it's not exactly true to say there's no freedom in the primary world, which it is true, but to say it's not exactly true, and then to say that any freedom in the secondary is purely illusionary. We're going to get back around to the word but now. But then I started out to say that even though that's not exactly true, and then I put in a quite severe comma, obviously. It could be a death-defying comma. It could be a comma that would consume us all, or at least 50 minutes. But you cannot say that anything's exact, which, one more time, is what institutions, it's what all forms of religion and philosophies attempt to do. That's part of their purpose, is to say, nay, nay. There are absolutes, or at least there is an absolute, and we is standing on it. Us Catholics, us Democrats, us socialists, us fascists, that we are there and there is one absolute. That's one reason they say it, because there's not. And that's one of the attractions to all forms of apparent dogma, especially if it can go past just routine dogma into the wonderful world of fanaticism, while yet being dressed up in a more socially acceptable way, it is almost irresistible. People will flock to it. People will clutch at the illusionary ankles of a fanatic. I say illusionary, he's got real ankles, but the fanatic says, I shall not be moved, because I am standing on some kind of objective truth. That is, I am standing on something that is not tied to, that is not absolutely relative to what the rest of you clowns, you peons, you serfs, you poor followers are tied to. And they all go, oh, oh, oh. Or those of you old enough, they sort of say, beat me, Daddy ate to the bar, which is, check with your grandmother. It has a certain musical connotation, but that's what they're saying, is let me clutch, let me hold on. Back to where we were, I was simply start out to say that although we can say that there is, or I said, there is no freedom in the primary world, and it's illusionary in the secondary. And now I say it's not exact, that is not what you would call truthful, that it's not just cut and what I say is just absolutely true. And it falls on one side of a line or another, that you've either cut it into, yes, that's true, or it's not. You can't do that. And the closest you can do it is what I know that the brain can't hardly hear. I don't mean it's your fault, but the brain cannot hardly hear it. The only thing you can say is that you can't say that. The only thing that you can say exact, the only thing you can say resembling objective truth, whatever you think that means is fine. The only thing that you can say exact about something in a closet is to say, by God, it's in a closet. Which, if you hear that in a certain allegorical way, I believe would meet the qualifications of being, by ordinary standards, intellectually unsatisfying. Because people will go, what? Some people are like that. Back to where we were. What is the word but? But. Again, the sound of the jailer's keys. Tied to, there is no freedom in the primary world, and it's illusionary in the secondary. Why stop at 2? The secondary world is made up of words. And so if there's any chance of freedom, you would have to first, once you see that it's not only allegorically true, it is literally true that the secondary world, everything that is singular in man, is made up of, is like the ant structures. You know, the army ants making a structure of themselves, they are protecting the queen and the colony itself, but the protection, it is them and it is that which contains them. Words make up the secondary world, and once you see that, then you can say, well, wait a minute, if we're going to talk about freedom, then words are the prison of the secondary world. Okay, let's go with that. But then you got to go, if that be true, then fair is fair, even with us who failed Philosophy 101. If words are the prison, then words have got to be the way to escape. Ah, Brutus, that it were. But Brutus, it are not. If it could be a form of escape for an ordinary man, it would be, I hate to say it again, but suicidal. Well, let's see, now we've got 3. What is the word but the sound of the jailer's keys once again? If you see that the secondary world, without playing any further with it, is composed of words. You can argue, you can do anything you want to, but if you take away words, you've got no secondary world. You got no art, you got no religion, you have no politics. If you take away words, all you've got is you operating, what was left of you and anybody. All you have left would be you operating at an optimum beaver, mink, dog, cat level. That's it. So you take away the words and you've got nothing. You've got nothing human, nothing period that resembles humans. Culture, civilization, nothing. So what is the word but again, the rattling of the jailer's keys? And if we start talking about freedom, most people, given just a slight twist, or if they knew they were given a certain kind of leeway, and if you say, what do you think forget the metaphysical, theoretical idea of what's the purpose of life. Let me just ask you, what do you think, besides being rich and famous, which of course any decent person wants to be, and better looking, I guess. But other than that, what would you say, being the intellectual, good-looking, rich person that you are, sir or madam, what would you say you would consider to be at least one little higher step would be the purpose of life? You know, what is it you want? And with a little nudging and tickle them a little bit, people would finally come around to saying, well, I'd like to be freer. And it has almost unlimited allegorical possibilities and connotations. They do not have to be religious. They don't have to be philosophically inclined. They can be living in the lower end of the human nervous system. They can still be oriented more toward Alabama or New Jersey or Albania or Bosnia-Herzegovina. I think that's the people from Azerbaijan moved over there. Boy, did they make a mistake. People would say that they want to be freer. But now if we go back to the idea of a secondary and a primary world in which men live. If you're talking, well, anybody who's watching this, if you're hearing, if the words make any sense, if you're verbal, you have two worlds going on. And it's all a matter that you're not necessarily locked into me being able to say, well, you live 70% of your life in the lower end of the nervous system and 30% otherwise. It can change from moment to moment. If it was the importance, if it could be done, which it could, but I'm not going into it, there could be some sort of paradigm drawn of you, some sort of template that would show in general what you are. That you live more down in a cheap bar downtown, down near Alabama, or that you live closer to a perhaps espresso bistro around Cambridge, Boston. But in either case, you would say in some way that you would like to be freer. But the majority of humanity right now, the majority of the time, still lives closer to a neighborhood bar. I mean, that is still the basic key to a mapping of planet Earth. Is most people, by and large, you got to understand, not just most people, but most parts of most people most of the time is still mucking about and pursuing primary aims. If it gets down, well, it's simply most people. It's not an attack, but if most people right now were given the choice, would you like for me to bring over an inflatable doll that looks like Kim Basinger, or a new edition, a new translation of Plato's Symposium? I submit to you, boys and girls. And girls, you can do your own version of an inflatable doll of somebody. Or if you ask somebody, would you prefer to have the combined works? See, somebody's already got it. If you start, would you like to have an original lithograph from Dolly? Or would you prefer to have a year's supply of McDonald's Big Macs? You know, a coupon. It's not an attack, it's just the way the world is. It is still the primary world. We can't do without it. You can't do without it. The planet can't do without it. Civilization can't do without it. Individual cultures and villages can't do without it. That is still the basis. You can't ever say, well, the foundations of a building, they're down underground. I saw it when they were doing it. It's down there on bedrock. It's down there with mud. Rats hang around there. But boy, that's a different thing. Up in the penthouse, that's where we have the people working on the new edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's where I want to live. Maybe. But you would then be an absolute idiot, even at the ordinary level, to say, by the way, I don't like being in a building where I know that downstairs we have people with second-grade education stoking the furnaces and taking care of the sewers. You know, get rid of them and get a higher class of people. Well, you know, that's been tried, by the way, many times. You just read history that way, but it's been tried. It's oftentimes known as the desire for utopia on Earth. And it seems to always bring out the possibility, at least, of Captain Irony suddenly popping up behind a fern and saying, did somebody call me? Because they attempt to bring about heaven on earth. And it's pretty shortly people say, my God, this is hell. You know? At any rate. But at the primary level, people would talk about freedom. That's where I want you to, we're still on the same subject, believe it or what, not. The primary people would say, yes, I want to be free. I want to be freer. And history is replete right up until today with those cries. And it comes out normally as political freedom. People say, well, I want more political freedom. That is about as close to the secondary world as primary people can get with an idea of freedom. They would say that I would be much happier even in a metaphysical manner, if I were freer. And that's going on right now on this planet. There are people not far removed from our physical environs, but all you got to do is just look across the ocean, a few other places, and people, and I'm not saying without any justification, because the secondary world runs on what? Justification. But there are people who would say, I could be more creative, I could be more artistic, I could be more religious if I did not have the king, wherever they are, if I did not have the civil authorities on my back. What I need is more freedom. It's part of the justice of things that people, men, and by and large, that's the kind of freedom they talk about. Because that's about as close as you can get to asking for primary freedom while getting it into a secondary realm. It's not that strange. How about, I'll give you another one. I was trying to pull your attention away from the same area of religion over and over. And it's not just religion, but almost as close, almost the same thing, is people hoping they won't die. People believing they won't die. People professing they won't die. That is the same thing as saying that I would have some sort of greater metaphysical wherewithal. I would have some way to more spiritually, intellectually exert myself if I had more political freedom. In that same ballpark, in that same area, right where the secondary and the primary world meets, are people saying that the real freedom they want is I don't want to die. That's the real freedom. Now that's right at the primary level. That's about the first time that the primary level begins to talk and gets an idea of freedom. And just as soon as it begins to talk, but the first thing it says, whether it says these words or not, is, hey. All right, it's about the second words. The first words is, it says, I'm going to die. And then the second one is, I don't want to die. So, see, that's the desire for freedom. But what I wanted you to see was the other comment I threw in, that there is no such thing as primary freedom, and it's only illusionary in the secondary. The point is, at the primary level, under any sane conditions, you must see, to take my descriptions temporarily, they're not exact, but we've been through that, there is no such thing as primary freedom. What would it be? It'd be insanity. It'd be the impossible. It'd be, well, if there's primary freedom, here's what I want. By God, I want to be free from ever having to eat again. And of course, if you're really a nutcase, I guess you could say, I'd like to be free from ever having to go to sleep and get in out of the cold or get in out of the heat again. And if you were a certifiable nutcase, I guess you'd say, no, what I really want is never to have to engage in sex again. Well, sir, show that man the door. Do you understand? There is no such thing, which is the wrap-up that I was trying to point out to you. All of that would be saying, I want to be free not to die. The freedom I want is freedom from death. That's like the whole wrap-up of the desire, the expression of wanting to be free in the primary world. There simply is no such thing. And if you try it, it's insanity, it's suicidal. That you can say, well, there is. You just named it. I'll show you, I'll quit eating. Well, all right. But you understand that's not sanity. That is not the heartbeat of America. Life. That is not what keeps the world going. That is not freedom. There is simply no such thing as primary freedom. I'm not trying to make a personal point, but if we're going to continue this, you've got to realize there's not. There's just not. There's nothing to discuss. But you can see it easing up, such as what I was trying to use an example of people saying, well, what I want is political freedom. That's just easing about. It's like putting your toe in the water because it sounds all right. And at the ordinary level, you cannot actually naysay it. There's no sane way to argue against that because people who are living under some tyrannical system right now, people who can't go out in the street and talk to people. If you go out and talk to one of your neighbors, you know, the thought police jumps in and says, "What are you guys talking about? You know you can't talk to one another in public." You know, that would be inclined to make most of us be somewhat upset, if not get into very quick and short-lived, probably, serious physical discussions with the thought police. Most of us wouldn't be around after a day or so. But on the surface, you can't argue with it, because the people say, well, you can't live under these conditions and actually blossom in the secondary sense. True. But there is no such thing as true freedom at that level anyway. And what I was trying to, again, get you to see the justice and the beauty of life built in such a way is that is the main kind, the supreme paramount kind of freedom that men call for, is that which, if they had it, would not serve the purposes that they believe it would. Do you follow? In other words, if the state, making them represent now primary forces, if the state were not so heavy on my case, I would be more artistic, I would be freer, and it all sounds, you can't deny it. You'd be an idiot. They say, I could blossom, I could be me. All right, there are countries in the world that have almost unlimited freedom. Is the world full of people who are me? I mean, is the world full of people walking down the street that look like Sinatra doing I gotta be? Do you follow? That when they do not have the kind of conditions that they would call political freedom, it is unprofitable for you to engage even with yourself into some sort of argument and say, well, they don't know what they're doing, it's not true. To them it is true. But just because you had more political freedom would not bring about the end result that the mind imagines. That is, if I had that kind of political freedom, read primary freedom, then my secondary world would just blossom forth like a box full of lilies that fell into a septic tank, or bulbs that are just, that'd be it. If I had the police and the king and everybody off my back, God, I'd paint in such a way that Pollock would turn over in his grave if he had one. It's just not true. But notice there again is the built-in justice, beauty, and efficiency of life is to believe that that's what I want. So that's the kind of freedom you have always heard about. That is the kind of freedom that that men are still apparently heavily seeking. But now out of the area of at least minimal secondary manifestations of that is the desire, people saying, I want to be politically free, I don't want any constraints, I do not want the state on my back, I do not want religion on my back, I want to be free from morality, which is kind of a one step they think above crying for political freedom, is I would be a true artist, I'm not moral, I don't believe in sexual mores, I don't care about any kind of religious tenets, I just want to be free to be whatever I am. That, and if somewhere in there, if you can see the real ultimate, the wrap-up of that is the desire to be free from death. So I want you to see that there is no such thing, operatively speaking, there is no such thing as freedom in the primary world. I'll say I hate to say it, but I don't hate to say it enough not to say it, so here I'll say it. I hate to say this. It's an illusion. That is, it never happens. That is, if it does seem to happen, it does not produce or bring about the results that you thought. To wit, if you miss that, you could turn, now Russia, take Russia. Right here, circa 1992, we're taping this. Who would have believed it? As the news commentators like to say, who would have believed it 2 years ago? You would have people in Russia now walking down the streets wearing Walkman, eating hamburgers, making obscene signs at the police. Who would have believed it? Now they're free, politically, compared to what they were and what's happened. According to most reports, they're about to fall apart again. That is, the so-called political freedom does not just suddenly produce the secondary manifestations that the human mind imagines it would. But imagining it would keeps the idea of freedom going. There is no such thing, operatively speaking. Profitably speaking, the idea of freedom in the primary world is beyond illusion. It's just a kind of intellectually moot point that actually furnishes, though, octane to keep the secondary world going. It is if you want to know, and it's like the ultimate carrot, that the ultimate donkey, that being all of us, can never ultimately reach. Oh, sure you can. It's known as the big D. Because every time I do that, somebody writes and says, well, as soon as you said that, I moved to Dallas and it didn't help. All right, there is no such thing as primary freedom, comma, and it's illusionary in the secondary. It does not really, if anybody was following some of this, it's not really as time-consuming to, pardon me, prove this part as it was the first part. Because if you followed that, then your ordinary mind could immediately jump ahead and say, well, in that case, then there is one place that freedom does, or some degree of freedom does exist, and that is the secondary world, because it is not locked in to that kind of absolute arbitrary, unmovable structure as the primary world, such as our bodies. We just can't really, to any measurable, to any great degree, muck around with your body. That is, you can't quit eating. You can't say, well, I want to be free from eating. It drives me nuts. It costs too much for one thing. And you eat, and then you got to go to the bathroom, and then the next day or hours later, I'll be damned if you don't have to, eat again, pay for it. So, once you can say, well, I see that, to use, being the big-hearted people that you are, humoring me, if you took my little picture for a minute and you go, all right, I agree, you're right. Using your pictures, there is no such thing as primary freedom. But, you put your own foot in it, because it's got to be secondary, because in the secondary, you've got things that can be mutated. You can improvise. You can change things in the secondary world. Well, now there's a goddamn understatement. Whew. Well, I went through that on the basis that the secondary world is nothing but that which is unstable and changeable. And so to say, well, now wait a minute, there is no amount of freedom, I'm playing the part of somebody that agreed with me, that heard all this and understood it. You did? Oh, that's right, I was playing a part. I thought I was actually somebody. You can say, all right, the secondary, there's an amount of freedom except for this fact, that there is nothing stable to start with. And so to say, well, wait a minute, the secondary world is absolutely subject to change, to variation. Do you understand? You have given a whole new meaning to redundancy. Or those of you that like to play those kind of weird games, you've given a whole new meaning to the area, that wonderful playing area that no one can identify out there on the field, that is between moot and redundancy. To say, well, wait a minute, there is such a thing as freedom in the secondary world. Somewhere between moot and redundancy. Or somewhere between oxymoronical and moronical. How about that? Or somewhere between impossible and imbecilic. Maybe someone should call the alliteration police. It would seem without any doubt that the secondary world would have to be the area wherein men could experience some freedom. That is where the men do attempt, and I'm taking the ordinary position, that men do attempt and can reasonably expect some success, do achieve some success, such as the idea of religion again, if you like that. The idea that I can change. The idea of psychiatry. The idea of any self-help group. The idea of proverbial wisdom. Why do you have proverbial wisdom? Well, it's cheaper than going to a damn psychiatrist. Why do we have maxims? Because I don't like to go to church. They're faster and they're shorter. Why do we have advice? So I don't have to listen to anybody talk a long time. And if you got some advice, 10 words or less. So that's the ordinary world. They don't have it down yet to the mystical. 5. what kind of advice, what kind of change is possible in the secondary world when the secondary world, remember all change, any possibility of doing change in the secondary world is verbally based. You got to remember that. So then the question is, well, what kind of change is it when the secondary world is from top to bottom, east to west, north to south? All three wheels on that tricycle are words. So to say, well, there is some degree of freedom in the secondary world. Well, tell us about it, sir. All right, I'll tell you. Now, you're right. I couldn't quit eating. And I couldn't really give up sex. But I'm going to tell you what. I used to be a Presbyterian, and now I'm Jewish. Guess they got me. I mean, I said that change in the secondary world is illusionary. And another man says, well, wait a minute. I'm even more up to date. At one time, I hate to admit this, says the man, but I was a fascist. I was a monarchist, a royalist. But now I am a Democrat and proud of it. And the people are sorely amazed. What have we just witnessed? And if I was playing the ordinary part, I could say, well, we have just witnessed an absolute living refutation of what you just said. Because we have, assuming the man's saying the truth, which I assume he's saying the truth. Like, who cares anyway? It's like the alternative, unless you're ordinary. And then you say, well, I do care. I'm not going to stand for a man lying, especially about something important. Oh, I didn't look at it that way. Okay, well, let's humor the man. We'll assume he's saying the truth. He said that at one time he was a fascist. I'm using that as, unless we have some serious Italians watching, I'm using that as a pejorative possibility of that which a man could be. I was a fascist. Now I'm a Republican with a small r. I'm a Democrat. And people would say, by God, that is serious change. In fact, that is serious change in the same kind of area that you were talking about freedom. What change? You're going to miss it. It's a blank wall. It's beige, I'll agree to that. And worst of all, it's right in front of your nose. All right, the man has changed what? He's changed his name. He was once a fascist. And all reasonable people listening to that are non-fascist, which if you're reasonable, you're a non-fascist, I assume, or a non-tyrannist, a non-monarchist. And you hear the man says, I was once a dyed-in-the-wool, true, maybe I should say communist. You people, your genes are probably wired more to that. I was once a communist. And you go, ooh. And he says, but, praise be to the gods of Jefferson and Washington and Disraeli and Gladstone and, of course, Winnie. I am now a Democrat, a Republican with a small r. And your nervous system goes, oh. Have you already missed it? He changed the word. Now, if you're ordinary, then you could go pouting out of the room and go, oh, wait a minute, you're making it too simple or something. Because he had to do more than that. I don't know. I know this, you can raise a nice crowd. As somebody wiser than us has said, that tour driver, religions have been started on less than that. A lot less. The man used to be a communist. Are you missing it? The man used to be an atheist. How about this? If those of you that are, your hormones are tied to the older parts of life, a man was an atheist. Now he's a mystic. He changed his name from Floyd to Herman. That's the freedom. I know I don't have to keep saying, did you miss it? Because I know most people miss it, or I wouldn't keep doing it. There was once a man that lived near here, wasn't too long ago, and he constantly complained that he had the habit of smoking cigarettes. And every now and then if you'd see him, he'd still have one, but if you said something about it, he'd say, "Oh, I quit." Not bad or not, he'd continue to smoke. He'd say, "Oh, yes." He said, "I sense you. The last time, what was it? About 6 months ago I saw you. I told you I'd had enough of that." Are you missing it again? If you're ordinary, of course, you could go into, what's the technical current terms? Conniption fits? Like if you had tried to follow any of the last 4 or 5 minutes, you could say, well, you're just being silly because you're saying that there was actually no freedom or no change because this one guy said he was once an atheist, a communist atheist, and now he's a small r Republican religious person, or at least a spiritual humanitarian or something. The man said he's improved, and you're insinuating that all he did was change his name. Of course, the person that would be saying that, they're insinuating that he did more than change his name. But how about this? What if he didn't do more than change his name? He just up and said it. Me and the guy that I'm talking for, we heard this guy stand up here at this self-help meeting, how to help yourself be freer, how to be a better human being. This guy stands up over here. You, the ordinary person, nice, educated, ordinary person, and me are sitting there, and this guy stands up and he says, "I'll give you a good example. I appreciate all you people who quit smoking and drinking and dressing up, like Pat Nixon and hanging around hockey games. But let me tell you," says this guy, "I'm going to tell you what real change is. I say this in all humility as much as I have. I used to be a communist. I used to be an atheist. I used to be very hostile toward my fellow man, and now, if I may say so, I am charitable. I am a Republican with a small r. I'm democratically inclined." And you're saying, don't lose your place. I was talking for an ordinary person, so you're saying that he just said that. Of course, you're saying that he's done more than that, and I'm saying he hasn't. I didn't say that. I'm saying that's all that happened. And what would happen is it's very likely that he'll get a round of applause. And it's not just the physical applause. He'll get a round of emotions. There'll be other nervous systems there within the network of people in that room, in that environment, that will favorably react, as witnessed by, they'll nudge each other. How about that? I thought it was a big deal. I quit drinking for a while. But you hear that? That man was anti-religious. He was living over in the country and he was supporting tyranny. He was trying to burn down churches. And talk about a change. Talk about an epiphany. Now, I didn't say this, but I'm back to what the ordinary person said. The ordinary person would say to me, well, you're insinuating that he just said that and didn't do it. All right, what if that's true? So what? Did anybody get up and say, prove it? Or what if he did make it up? How about all the people that sat there and got a positive benefit from it and made them feel better? Brought a tear to their eye. I'm not being sarcastic. What difference does that make? We'll save some time and I'll guess for you. Starts with N. Although it's near Dallas, it's not Nebraska. No. It's none. The idea of change in the secondary world, the idea of freedom, is no more than that. But it's no less than that. What the hell do you want? The guy says, yeah, I quit smoking. God, you don't know how much better I feel since I quit. I tried. Well, how long have I known you now? Well, I tried. I'll admit. I must have tried, 2 or 3 times, and finally I said, hey, Floyd, that's what I call myself. I said, Floyd, you just got to stop it. You just got to stop it. At first I thought, I heard all these things, how hard it was, and people going to all these things, and I just decided, hey, I'll stop. And I stopped, and that was it. Now, you think that's funny? You say that's silly. Is it? The guy stood up and says, I used to attack people where I lived for being religious. I laughed at them. I didn't discriminate. I didn't care whether they're Catholic, Jewish, Protestant. I attacked them all. Now, I don't know. I realize I'm not particularly religious myself, even now. But I realize that's not the way to treat your fellow man. He can say that, but for all you know, he's a man still smoking. and telling you how much better you feel since you quit smoking. But if you can't see the cigarette, you miss the point to say, wait a minute, that's just some kind of pretension. What in the hell do you think the world of man is? All right. The world of man is more than that. The world of man is actually, the initials are SP. That does not stand for Super Peru. The idea of freedom in the secondary world, back to, we're getting around to, what's the word, but the jailer rattling the keys again. Any idea of freedom in the secondary world? You see, you got it back to the second of the three wheels I drug up tonight, that there is no freedom in the primary world, and freedom in the secondary is illusionary. It's not to say that freedom in the secondary world doesn't exist, it's to say that it doesn't happen. Or for those of you who won't be technical, it's not to say it doesn't happen, it's closer to say that it doesn't exist. That is, if somebody says it exists, hell, it existed. But do you see that from a more complex view, not a sarcastic, not a critical, it's the fourth wheel on a tricycle, that if a man says, I no longer hate my fellow man, if you care, one way or the other, if you have any critique, if you go, I don't believe him, I've never trusted a man whose nose was bent that way anyway, or I don't trust, where are you from, sir? And you go, well, he almost fooled me till I found out that he has Norwegian blood. And I still remember that used Volvo I bought from a man. I wouldn't believe. If he says it, do you see, if you can get past any form of criticism, if you can get past any point of taking sides, if he says that he exerted some freedom, what difference does it make? Unless you're in the same, we're getting closer, jailhouse as him, and you're hearing the rattling of the keys, and you think, who woke me up? It's for you to object, wait a minute, he may be lying. I keep saying it's not sarcastic, but I keep trying to drag out little dramatics to get you to see the point. Here we go. He says he's not lying. What if he is? What difference does it make? None. Well, let me put it to you this way. I'll put it to you another way. None. And if you're so tied up with the secondary world that that's your hobby in life, is being secondarily alive, which is almost everybody on this planet. For those of you watching this on TV, it's not that the world's wrong. To them, it is important. But that's part of what makes life go around, is people saying, well, they didn't really change. Or they did change and they changed back. Or they say they changed, but I don't believe that they've changed completely. Or they say they've changed, and I say they made a mistake. They should stay like they did. It all has no bearing, if you got a wider view of it, of whether they changed or didn't change. It's people inside of a closet is what the secondary world is. The primary world is a closet also, but you can't change. And if you do change, all it is suicidal, no matter how you dream. To quit eating, suicidal. Humanity, if everyone quit screwing, suicidal for the institution, the whole organism of humanity. There is no freedom. There's nothing sane to discuss, nothing profitable to discuss about freedom at the secondary level. Forget it. So, I mean, the primary. Then the secondary, you'd think, well, it's a different story. Yeah, you're right. It makes even less sense. Because there, it seems as though, well, wait a minute. We can change, all right? You can. But you're still in a closet, but it's a different kind of closet. You can sit over in that corner, or you can sit in this corner. You can stand up, or you can sit down. Or you can stand up and say, I don't want to stand up. Or you can sit down and say, God, I feel guilty sitting down. Or you can sit down and look at people standing up and say, you should feel guilty. Or you can sit down and look at people standing up and say, God, I envy people that can stand up. Or you can stand up and look at people that stand up and say, how about those idiots sitting down? Or you can stand up and turn to people standing up and say, if we were more humble, as God probably intended, we too would sit down. And on and on and on. There's no end to it. That is the freedom of the secondary world. That's why I say it's illusionary. It doesn't matter. I know it seems to matter if you're there, because if a secondary man, if that's his life, and he says, wait a minute, I feel much better now that I've quit drinking, that I've quit attacking my fellow man for religious reasons. Well, I know he does. Well, how do you know that? Well, he said he did. I know he does. If he say he did, he does. Who cares? In a non-pejorative sense. He says he does. But for you to believe that that's freedom, rather than me finally turning into a Baptist preacher, if you believe that, then there's nothing else to say. What it means is, ask the man to dance. I mean, you might as well. You've been dancing with him all your life. So what is the word but? The secondary world of man is made up of words. No matter how you cut it, once you see it, it doesn't take the fun out, and it doesn't take the mysticism out, and it doesn't take anything out. It's just that you go, oh my God, it's right in front of my eyes. Well, never mind that. The secondary world is a world of words. So if there is any captivity, which everyone says there is, everyone says, I am not as free as I want to be. So if there is any in the secondary realm, we've already bypassed, we've marked out the primary, there's no such profitable thing, period, as freedom there. Just forget it. So, if there is any in the secondary, if it's made up of words, then the freedom has to be, in one way or the other, through words, by words. If words formed our prison, if words formed our captivity, then the way out has got to be through words. God, that sounds neat. I mean, it sounds irrefutable. That's what you think. It just sounds as though it has to be. If it were true, if that were correct, which you might notice would explain, well, may I suggest, would be the basis, not explain, would be the basis of the secondary world's institutions, their philosophies, particularly their religions, profession of the magic in words. That is exactly, I know when it comes out in religion, they will say otherwise, that it's so far beyond the physical realm that we can't discuss it. They just say that they're words that are magic, all sorts of verbal totems throughout the world, chants, terms, things that cannot be said. It's still a belief that there's some magic in words somewhere, that there's a magic name for God, or that God gave a magic word to somebody, and we're all looking for it, or He gave it to somebody, and it's been passed around, and you can't say it. That whole thing is just what I'm talking about, is the belief that, hey, words did put us in prison, and words have got to get us out. We just don't know which ones they are. Which, again, is the big E. That's not Ithaca, because Ithaca starts with an I anyway. It's the big efficiency. It's to believe that there is a magic word, that words are our prison, and so words must be the key. All right, if that were true, getting back to the opening line, then what is the word but? All right, if words are the basis of man's secondary captivity, and if it were true, as it would seem to be logically, sequentially, then in that case, somewhere in words has to be the way out. What if that's still true? Then how in the world did the word but show up? It would be as though a man goes, aha, now I understand the nature of man's captivity. That is, he sees the wall, he says, now I see it. But that if it were true, that words might get you out, that here it is, suddenly you turn around. You want me to change the allegory? No problem. Tell the maid not to bother with this room, I'll change it. There you are in secondary. Surprising how many high-class people are so familiar with cheap motel rates. I don't mean surprising like surprising. There you are, let us say, in the secondary prison, as it would seem, the confines of the secondary world, And you suddenly turn around, and instead of my blank wall, let's say that you see, by God, the door, my cell door is right here before me, and it's cracked. I can walk out. But, did you hear that sound? They just locked the friggin' door back. Because if words are the way out, then you'd say, aha, I see now. All I've got to do is walk through that door. But, do you follow? This is not a game on rhetoric. This is the flow of energy in the human nervous system, the electrochemical flow that men ordinarily call thought, which manifests itself in words. As a man says, and you got to really take this allegorical, Lee, a man says, because I'm going to make up the example to follow the but there's as many fill-ins after my but in the sentence as you can think about. A man says, for instance, I suddenly realized all of my dreams, all of my ideas of some kind of theoretical freedom, I suddenly look, they're not dreams, they're not theoretical, they're not otherworldly. The damn door is open. But why did they leave my door open? Now see, I'm just going to make up, well, I can make up a few more, I guess some of you got it. Well, I see that all I've got to do, the door is open, all I've got to do is walk through it. But I've been here so long, I wonder if I'll know what to do. I see that the door is open. My ideas of freedom are that I'm going to struggle real hard and finally get somewhere. I see that all I've got to do is just walk through here. But I'm not sure what will happen after that. Every time the word but shows up, which it shows up almost anytime you've got a human thought that runs over 5 words. Of course, if you want to really get good at this, a lot of times the crafty devil that it is, but hides under a synonym. It disguises itself as AND. And if it seems like, when it's really tricky, I don't know, maybe it drinks or whatever, it thinks you're getting sharp, it'll even sometimes go to OR. And I don't mean emergency room, for those of you that spell it that way in Mississippi. But when the human mind, it cannot look directly, that's not its basis. See, if there was... We'll leave with a big finish because I do believe a bunch of you got your hands on it. If you simply did look, and there is an idea, if there was some valid idea that I am, not primarily, but in the secondary world, I'm imprisoned through my beliefs, my fears, everything that's here in me that holds me back, the very things that other people, ordinary people, say are psychological traumas, lack of self-confidence, I'm not my own best friend, I feel like I'm not okay. All of that is some form of captivity. But if the human mind, if somebody says, well, wait a minute, there is some form of freedom, I suddenly realize it. All I've got to do is just, do it, whatever it is. It can't stop there. Because if it could put it in 5 words, just more or less. But if it even says, my God, after all these years of struggle and meditating and taking drugs and this and that, I suddenly see the answer is simply so-and-so. But my God, what does that portend for the rest of my life? You understand? Don't take any of these, do any you want to. A man cannot have this blinding moment of epiphany. Especially historically. I know that many of you thought it did, and you savored little books and you searched for them. If a man did, he wouldn't have written a damn book. I mean, maybe he'd written a book, but you'd open it and it'd been 1 page, and on that page would be 1 line. It'd be more or less 5 or 6 letters. I suggest it'd be 5 or less. But as long as it's a book, you know one thing. Even if at one time, this one guy, this whoever he was, Guru X or Buddha, somebody, Vishnu, went, I see it. Right after that he said, but, or else you wouldn't have had a book. And as long as you say but, what is but? What is but the sound again of the jailer's key? Because if a man here and there did suddenly turn around, which they did, I'll grant you that if that makes any difference. History is replete, sort of men who saw the wall. Men who realized, well, hey, the door is open. Or men who realized what the door is. Let's agree. I'll just go ahead and say, yeah, they did. But if you heard of them, especially they wrote a book, as soon as they saw it, what happened? Whatever it was they said, whatever it was that they saw, and then they told themselves, I see it, but how will I tell somebody? I see it, but it can't be true. I see how simple it is, but it can't be that simple. And of course it's not. Because as soon as you say but, what is but? It's like a moment, let's assume, a moment, an epiphany of ephemeral freedom, and suddenly it was clank, clank, clank. Anybody who would like to take this, I keep saying it's allegorical, it is right in your face physical too, is the word but. Try thinking without the word but. Try talking without it if you really want to drive yourself crazy in everyday affairs, but try thinking without but. And you'll find out your brain almost goes into some kind of herniated disc, whatever the hell that is. I always wanted to say that. Herniated disc. I mean, it sounds horrible. But if you try to think and go and stop all buts, see what you got. It's like your brain feels like you're walking along and keep going. Good night.